that music, Rafi, No Wall Too Tall, from his upcoming CD, Communion. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As we return to our interview with David Korten, author of Agenda for a New Economy, From Phantom Wealth to Real Wealth, Why Wall Street Can't Be Fixed and How to Help It.
You talk about this as a much more holistic and fundamental approach to the crisis we're facing right now. But a few days ago, in his inaugural speech, President Obama, in the only reference he made to the market, he said something to the effect that government, without the watchful eye of government, the market can sometimes spin out of control. But that basically reaffirming our markets and our system as the best to offer for the world. Your sense of his response, given the nature of the crisis you think we face right now?
Well, it's always hard to tell exactly what that translates into, but I think the bottom line of what he's saying is that for a market to function efficiently in the service of society, it has to operate within a framework of rules. And it's interesting, you know, by my understanding of real market economics, that's a fundamental part of market efficiency. Now, of course, what we've been driven by is an economic ideology that claims to be a market theory, but in fact is anti-market. Because what happens if you try to operate a market without rules, you get this consolidation of power, the disconnect of financial power from the real economy of real people and real goods and services, and you develop a totally extractive economy. You know, theoretically in economics, economists talk about markets as a range from the purely competitive market, which, you know, the kind of model would be the farmer's market, like down here at Union Square, where I used to live. At the other end is the purely monopolistic or monopoly market, which has none of the beneficial features of the perfect competition. But they say, well, because the perfect competition works really well, you know, the market economy is the way to go. I mean, basically, we need to realize we've been told that there are only two economic models. One is the capitalist model, and the other is the communist or socialist model. One, capitalists own everything, and the other, the government runs everything. The real alternative is, in fact, a real market economy that looks a whole lot more like what Adam Smith had in mind, which looks more like a farmer's market. And I think, you know, we talk about Wall Street and Main Street, and really the solution is to rebuild a new economy based on Main Street, which means local businesses and people who are rooted in their community and working within a framework of community values and a set of public rules that enforce basic conditions of market efficiency.
Isn't part of the problem, as I hear you talk about even in the classical style of capitalism, we've seen a huge turn away. For instance, so much of our financial system now is in derivatives and credit default swaps, and all of these unregulated and almost unknown aspects of the financial system. And then the rise in recent years of all of these private equity firms, at least in the classic corporation, there are shareholders and their boards of directors, and you have filings with the SEC, and you have some sort of transparency. But now with these private equity firms dominating so much of the investment, and with all of these off-the-books financial systems, you really have a system that no one even knows how deep the problem is.
That's absolutely right. And you know, the values have morphed further and further away from any kind of connection to or commitment to a larger public interest. And of course, underlying this is also this immoral philosophy that says if we each simply pursue our individual financial benefit, that this maximizes the benefit for the society. Now, that is about as corrupt a theory as one could imagine. We are seeing the consequences of it. And one of the things we have to break out of is to recognize that it's it's pragmatically flawed, it is morally flawed, that there is a community interest, and it beholds every one of us in every aspect of our life to recognize not only our personal interest, but also the collective interest, which means we've got to create a totally different economy around different institutions and different values.
Now, as people listen to you, David Korten, they might be saying, this is really pie in the sky. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you're redefining it as apple pie in the sky, right, as patriotic.
It is patriotic, it's democratic.
You're saying that Wall Street can't be fixed. How do we replace it? Lay out how the environment fits into this and exactly what you mean when you say, you know, families should be able to do things more together. How do people survive? Why is Main Street more real than Wall Street?
Well, because Wall Street is totally in the business of creating phantom wealth. You know, it goes back to one of the fundamentals that I realized when I was working in international development, and I began to wonder, why is it that the more developed the country gets, there's more and more people living in poverty? And it comes down to a very simple recognition. All the decisions that we make in official aid agencies are based on what will maximize the returns to money, which means to people who already have money. And people who don't have any money basically don't fit into the equation. And that's the way our whole economy, the whole Wall Street picture is defined. So part of the shift is recognizing again that the whole concept of economic growth is flawed in terms of how we measure it. Because in fact, what economic growth really measures is the cost of producing whatever level of human well-being, health and well-being we have achieved. So in an economy that works, we would start assessing economic performance against indicators of the health of our children, of our families, of our communities, the health of our natural systems. And we would look at GDP as a measure of the cost of that attainment, so we would be trying to minimize GDP rather than maximize it as we organize economies that are really about, they're about building community. They are about providing people with meaningful jobs that give us a sense of personal meaning in our lives.
Give us an example.
Well, I mean, one of the interesting examples is the data that shows that people who shop in a farmer's market have 10 times the number of conversations of people who shop in a supermarket. And, you know, I know that from when I lived here in New York on Union Square, and I did most of my grocery shopping at the farmer's market. And yeah, you meet people and you talk and you meet your neighbors and you get acquainted with the farmer that grows your produce and so forth. And this is all about building relationships. And we have so monetized the economy, and a part of that process is monetizing relationships, and it diminishes our very humanity.
I'd like to ask you to put this more in the perspective of our global economy. Clearly, one of the great economic trends of the past 50 years is that the industrial heartland of America has moved from the Midwest to China, to India, to the developing world, and much of the production of the West is now in countries where the labor standards under which that production is made is far inferior to where it was made when it was here in Western Europe or the United States. It seems to me at this point an almost irreversible trend. How will that affect the future of American society in 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
Well, in some ways, it is a very reversible trend, because we have been supporting that purely by living off of consumer credit extended by the rest of the world. And the rest of the world's beginning to finally wake up to the fact that the U.S. dollar is not worth as much as we all thought it was, because our own economy is increasingly built on, and this has been an explicit policy, the growth of the financial sector is a percentage of our total economy. So we built an economy that assumes that we can live by simply creating money out of nothing, advertising to sell goods and services produced in China, security services to maintain order in the face of breakdown, health services to make up for the fact that we're eating crummy, non-nutritious food and ingesting all sorts of toxins from the environment, and toxic waste cleanup. Now, this is not the foundation for much of an economy. The rest of the world is at some point going to stop sending us their goods and their food, because they're going to realize that they're much better off to eat that food themselves and to produce shoes for their own children rather than shipping to us. So either we get cracking on rebuilding our economy and our capacity to produce, or we're going to end up in a pretty desperate strait in the not-too-distant future. And of course, while we're doing this, we need to rebuild all that around a model that is environmentally sustainable, which means our total consumption of material goods has to drop significantly. But if you put it in the context of, well, if we get rid of our military